there, Morgan. So for Essay 2, Eric and I decided to do screencast comments for each individual student. It's a really challenging essay, and so we want to make sure that we're giving good feedback to people. And we also decided that we want to allow everyone to do a rewrite if they're interested. So it's certainly not a requirement, but if you are looking at the feedback and your grade and you're thinking, I want to take another shot at rewriting this essay, then you are welcome to do so. And we would ask you to let us know and then have it into us in about a week. And so what I'd like to do in this screencast is just kind of walk through your Kant letter mostly. I don't think we need to spend too much time on the personal letter, because if you look at the rubric, you'll see that that's where most of the points are shaking out for this essay, is with the Kant letter, because that's really the ethics comprehension portion of this assessment. So I think that my feedback for you with the Kant letter is actually going to be the most worthwhile thing for you to have in terms of a revision. So I'm going to focus there, and then we can look a little bit at the letter to Julie from you. And so starting with the Kant letter, let's just kind of break this down paragraph by paragraph. In looking at your first paragraph right here, I think that you've met the goal of definitely letting Julie know that there are these two formulations or these two rules that Kant is going to use in order to determine whether or not her actions are acceptable or unacceptable. So I think that this intro is working pretty well for the most part. If you were to do a revision, my biggest changes would be to state your thesis a little more clearly. So where can you actually state to Julie that this is immoral and that she needs to come clean with her husband? I think you get pretty close to it right here. Let's see. I need to grab the pen up here. Your decisions to cheat and lie aren't in agreement to my universal laws. So I think you're implying there that you disagree with her actions, but you can come straight out in a very clear thesis claim and say, Julie, I believe that your actions, cheating and lying, are immoral, and I'm going to show you why based on my two formulations of the categorical imperative, which you then go on to state here for her. My other suggestion for the first paragraph is to revisit this last sentence here. As human beings, we have perfect duties to follow that avoid interfering, damaging, or misusing the ability to make free decisions. That includes not lying. So I think I see where you're going with this, but Julie, having never studied Kant, is going to need you to unpack that a little bit. So what exactly does that mean? That almost sounds like something that you could have pulled from a resource on Kant, but without explaining it in your own words or really giving Julie a fuller sense of what that means. That sentence is really just not going to make any sense to her at all. So my suggestions would be to either unpack that so that you tell Julie exactly what that means, or just cut that sentence out and maybe address that idea of rational beings, free will, using our rationality to make choices, that kind of thing, maybe elsewhere in the essay. So those are two different paths you could take, whichever feels better for you. So then coming down to this first body paragraph here, this is where we might expect you to address the first formulation of the categorical imperative, which is act as if the maxims of your action were to become, through your will, a universal law of nature. So that's the first formulation. So this is where the reader's going to expect you to just really dig into that first formulation and tell us what that means and why that points to Julie being unethical. So let's read this paragraph. When it comes to your husband, you are making the assumption that his lack of sexual commitment is strictly because of his sexual performance issues, but have you asked him if he himself is struggling with this issue? So that's a great question, and I think it's something that would fit in your own personal letter, but that is not something that Kant is going to be concerned with. So you can see I'm actually just drawing a line right through this. So if you were to revise, I would say take that out, because that doesn't concern Kant at all. Kant is strictly concerned with the logic, the logical soundness of people's actions. And so that is the kind of thing that he wouldn't get into. So it'd make more sense, I think, to start right here. In accordance to my first categorical imperative, you as an individual have a duty to act universally, meaning to think about him in this situation too. Lying and cheating on your husband takes away his ability to make decisions, have freedom, and the power to defend himself. That's really good. I mean, that is an excellent point that, yes, by taking away his access to the truth, he is not making fully informed decisions, okay? So this is where you're kind of getting into this first formulation stuff right here, which is great. But then what happens right after that is, let me grab a different highlighter, is you start talking about the second formulation. Here, you are treating your husband and S's wife as a means to an end rather than an end in themselves, which relates to my second imperative. By being fraudulent, you are following a rule. Okay, so now we are getting back into the first rule that cannot be universalized, which is allowing you to only act upon yourself and not others. That might be a little confusing to Julie, but this is the first formulation. And then you talk about taking away his rights as a moral individual, which is actually the second formulation. So you can see with the color coding here that what's happening is in this paragraph, the reader's being bounced like a ping pong ball across the table. And so we're going to the first formulation, the second formulation, back to the first formulation, then a little bit of the second formulation. And so Julie, as a non-philosopher, is going to get really confused by this. And so you're going to want to organize your essay so that you have your intro paragraph, and the first body paragraph should only be about the first formulation of the categorical imperative. So you only want to talk about that. And there's one other place where that first formulation comes up, and that is down here in the third paragraph when you say, imagine living in a world where all people followed your duty. Your duty right now is following a specific type of manner. I think by duty you mean your example, like the things you're doing right now. If you're demonstrating cheating within your marriage, then it's allowing others to cheat as well within theirs. Okay, so this is, again, the first formulation, but the sentence that follows it is the second formulation. This one here is all the second formulation stuff as well. So you can kind of see through these two paragraphs how, again, we're being bounced back and forth, so it's really hard for the reader to form a whole clear picture of what these two formulations are about. So my suggestion is to do this. In this second paragraph, your body paragraph, cut that first sentence that's irrelevant to Kant. Focus on the first formulation. If the first formulation asks people to imagine that their actions were a rule that was universalized and everyone could do it, what would the rule be in this case? What is Julie doing that everybody should be able to do? And I think you get this. You're starting to suggest that you get this, but the rule would be everyone should cheat. Okay? So you need to ask Julie, what happens, Julie, if everybody's cheating? What happens to marriage? Well, if literally every single person who's in a marriage is cheating, then really what's the point of getting married, right? Like, you get married specifically so that you can have a loyal relationship with fidelity to one person. And so if the rule is that you should cheat on this person, then marriage goes away, right? Why would anybody get married? So it's illogical because you can't do it and maintain the institution of marriage at the same time. If everybody was to do it, marriage would fall apart as a concept. That's what makes it illogical, okay? But Julie doesn't know why illogical means unethical. So why is it that just because it's illogical, it's unethical? Well, the reason why it's unethical is because we are equal, moral beings. Kant does not think that Julie is more special than everybody else. Kant thinks that Julie is a free-thinking, rational human being, just like her husband, just like S, just like Mrs. S, just like everyone. So therefore, Julie is the same as the rest of us, right? We are all equal moral beings. So if we can't all follow this rule, why should Julie get to follow this rule? Is she special? Is she better than everybody else? If she is treating herself as different, then she's not recognizing herself as an equal moral being. She's expecting everybody else to play by the rules while she can get away with breaking the rule because she's somehow better or different than everybody else. That is what makes it unethical, okay? So the simple fact that it's illogical is not enough. It's unethical because Julie is doing something that literally everybody else can't do. And so she must think that she's above everybody else. and she's not, because Kant says we are all moral equals. Okay, so that's what makes that piece unethical. So then I think for the paragraph 3, right now you have the first and second formulation bleeding together. I would pull this stuff about you were treating your husband and as his wife as a means to an end rather than an end in themselves, which leads me to my second imperative. I would pull that all out and start the third paragraph with that. So rather than bouncing us back and forth, do everything, all the work you can with the first formulation, and then transition us into the second formulation. And then I think you could still keep this paragraph as your third paragraph when it comes to S and his wife. You just need to take out all the yellow stuff here that has to do with the first formulation rather than the second formulation. And so all of that would still hold up, and maybe you even want to flesh that out a little bit more. But I think just making some organizational changes in here is going to allow you to see where your points need more development, and to help the reader get through those points in a cohesive way. As far as your letter goes, you can see all these stars in here. I thought you had some really, I thought you had some really thoughtful advice for Julie. It was so fun to read these because you can just see people have their own experience and expertise with relationships that they kind of bring to this letter. And so the same thing with yours. There were just some great points that you raised, and some of the points that you made in this letter even helped to showcase your understanding of Kant a little bit further too, like this one where you're using him to fill this emptiness, this empty hole, this desire that your husband isn't fulfilling. So some of these things even feel a little bit like Kant, which is just great. This idea right here, you're allowing yourself to make the decisions without your husband's help. Kant would say that's unfair. You're not treating him as a fully developed moral rational being. But what you're saying is, and I like how you put it in your own words, is that really what a marriage is about? Isn't a marriage something that the two of you need to communicate on and decide together? Why are you taking this into your own hands, Julie? And so again, it's a Kantian idea, but you have put it in your own ideas and your own way of thinking, which I think works really well. And then also this argument at the end here that Julie, don't try to fool your reader into thinking that there's only two choices here. There are many other things that you and your husband can do to seek to resolve this issue. So very thoughtful, I think, in places in your letter. And so really most of the revision, I would suggest really just focus on the Kant letter. So let us know, Morgan, if you're interested in revising. We'd like to see a revision in about a week if you want to. If you rather would focus on Essay 3 and just be done with Essay 2, that's okay too. Either way, if you hung in there and watched this screencast to the end, I'm going to put a code word below the screencast, and you can email that code word to me and to Eric, and we'll give you extra credit just for having watched this. Thanks.